Hi, good morning. My name is Arlie, if you didn't already know, and this is another vlog. The second one in a series of vlogs I'm doing that are supposed to be completely casual and unscripted and basically just me being me and spouting off whatever comes to my mind. Now, while they are unscripted, I did feel like I should think of basic themes to go into these vlogs. So, for this particular one, the theme that I thought of when I woke up this morning, I was like, you know what? I'm going to talk about garden design. And I'm sure the title already said something in relation to that. But if you didn't already know, based on previous videos, I am a gardening obsessor. I'm trying to start my own landscape business. I am currently helping a friend redo their entire backyard. And I've been like gardening or designing gardens or thinking about flowers for the past 10 plus years. So it's definitely a huge part of who I am at my core. So basically, for those out there who seem kind of overwhelmed by the concept of like, well, oh, it would be nice to have a garden, or I would like that, it can be overwhelming. And there's a lot of aspects to think about when you think about the true depth of a garden that's supposed to last for years and years and years. But it can be broken down into a bunch of basic steps that might help you out. So I was thinking I would talk about like the basic concept of designing a garden from the ground up. So step one is to look at everything like a blank canvas. And if you already have a blank canvas, that's great. And when I say blank canvas, I mean like you have a yard and it's just a square. It's just like, okay, here's a square, here's a patch of lawn, and that's it. Or even better, it's just a patch of dirt. There's nothing growing in it, it's just an empty patch of dirt. But even if your yard or your garden area is not like that, you have to look at it like that. You have to look at almost into the future and be like, okay, this is what it would look like if I cleared it out and basically just poured a bunch of dirt over everything and it was just flat. Because that is the best starting point you can have when it comes to a garden, because then it kind of lets your mind work. Okay, this can go here and that can go there and stuff like that. Like you can imagine the height differences, and you can imagine the colors, you can imagine how it would look from a certain angle. So that's the first thing that I always do, and that's the first thing that is easiest to do, is imagine it as a blank canvas. Once you have that idea in mind, then it's time to start brainstorming. Then it's time to start searching the internet, looking in books, like researching the kinds of things that you already kind of have an idea of what you like. And it helps to have a specific idea of like the types of things you like. You don't have to know the types of flowers you like. You don't have to know everything right off the top of your head, especially if you're not an expert in any of that kind of things. But it helps, like, oh, your favorite color is purple. Okay, now you have a starting point. Start looking for purple flowers. Or start looking for plants that have purple leaves. Or somewhere within that same color palette. Because there's a lot of plants that complement one another in a certain palette. So that is the next step, is to research. Do as much research as you can. Think about, a lot of different aspects of your yard. Does your yard get sun all day? Does your yard have a gigantic tree in it that would be too much of a hassle to remove, so you're going to keep it, but it shades your whole yard? You know, like these are basic things that you need to think about before deciding on the types of plants and flowers that you want, because they're going to determine whether or not a plant is going to do well. It's going to be happy where you put it, or whether it's just going to die off after a season or two. So step one, blank canvas. Step two, research. Step three is to implement the hardscapes first. Once you actually start your project, like once you're like, okay, I'm ready to go to Home Depot and buy a bunch of crap. The stuff you're going to want to buy first: gravel, rocks, paver bricks, like anything that you want to add that is part of a hardscape or masonry, especially if you're doing it yourself. But regardless of who's doing it, you want that stuff to be added in first, because that stuff is going to be far more permanent than any plants, bushes, trees, or what have you that you're going to be able to put in there. Yes, everything can be removed if you know the right people or if you have enough money to pay for it, but hardscapes come first because they are more permanent immediately once they're done. Whereas plants become more permanent over time, but you can always fiddle with them, if you don't like how they turn out or whatever. So once you have an idea for how the hardscape should be, let's say you want a path and you have it curving around your garden, then you can start thinking of your plot as not a blank canvas, but a set of shapes. Let's say you have one curving path going through the center of your blank plot. Then that breaks it up into two halves. So then you have to start thinking about each half as its own entity. Do you want them to be symmetrical, or do you want them to be completely different from one another? Because a lot of people who have pathways running through their gardens, they want both sides to look exactly the same. Some people have pathways that weave in and out so that if you're sitting on a bench on one side of the yard, even if the yard is a small one, you can't see the other side of the path because it's blocked by all this tall foliage and plants, and it kind of makes it feel like a getaway. So blank canvas, research, hardscapes. And then once you have all of that stuff down and you kind of know, because you've researched, the general idea of the types of plants you want and the types of plants that will thrive in your backyard, then it's time to start picking out plants and prepping the dirt. There's a lot of stuff you can do that's like goes a little more in depth. Like there's soil tests to see if, oh, well, these plants like clay soil and these plants like loamy soil, and it definitely goes more in depth than what I'm saying right now. But all in all, plants need water, plants need nutrients, and plants need sun. So those are the three main things that you're going to want to consider that will have the greatest amount of impact on a plant. Because I've grown plants that were specifically meant for sandy soils in a clay soil, and as long as it gets the proper care and maintenance, it will thrive. It all depends on the amount of research and the amount of aftercare you're willing to put in once you put a plant in the ground. And I know a lot of people most people that I know at the very least, once they put a plant in the ground, they want to be able to expect to shove it in and leave it there, and then that it'll just look pretty every year. And that's a specific style of plant. You actually have to research the types of plants that are self-maintaining or that require very, very little maintenance. Which is why I deal mostly in perennials and like butterfly plants and natives, because a lot of those, all they require is for you to put them in the ground and water them when they need water, and then at the end of every year you just chop them down to the ground and they'll come back from the roots every year, stronger and better than ever. Most of them don't even need fertilizer, assuming your soil is not leached, which most people don't have leached soil. You know, as stuff dies down, and you know, worms and decay and all different kinds of biological life like keeps nutrients in the soil. So unless you live on a farm, because a lot of times monocultures on farms will seep nutrients out of the ground, which is why there's a whole deal with crop rotation and a bunch of other stuff that's kind of that's like for another vlog if people want it. But for those basic concepts, designing a garden really isn't that hard. You just have to imagine what you want. Do you want a wave of the same color? Do you want a mishmash and hodgepodge of tons of different heights, shapes, and colors? You know, do you want a very clean-cut, primmed and pressed, you know, like fancy Victorian English garden? You know, do you want a messy wildflower cottage garden? Like, the possibilities are literally endless. With how many different kinds of flowers and different kinds of styles and creativities you can add to a simple plot of land. So, I mean, I know this was very basic, and I didn't really want to get too far in depth to like, you know, like, oh, well, you know, these plants bloom in spring and these plants bloom in summer. Like, there's a lot more that goes into it when you're really trying to plan for an all-year showcase. But just for people just starting out, it's simple just to think, what do you like? You know, research what you like, see if it works for your area, and try it out. Because that's the only way you're going to learn the way that everyone that you're trying to learn from has been taught. You know, most of my knowledge comes from a little bit from books, but mostly from trial and error. And a lot of times when it comes to gardens, trial and error will prove the books wrong. You know, there are people who have gone against, like, hardiness zones and, like, oh, this plant's not supposed to grow in Chicago or that far north. And people have proved it wrong. And they've kept things alive. And a lot of times people discover new things and new aspects of plants every day. So, any of you who are interested in this kind of stuff, you know, use that as a very loose guideline. And, you know, I hope it helps for those of you trying to start out on your own projects. But in all honesty, this was mainly just supposed to be me spouting off like the things that come to my mind when people want me to design a garden for them. But if you guys had specific questions about any particular aspect or any particular style of garden or even a specific plant or anything like that when it comes to gardening, flowers, or just general horticultural knowledge, I would love to answer that kind of stuff, because I feel like, you know, this is the kind of thing that doesn't have a direct, like a focused direction, whereas if I had questions to answer, that would definitely focus a lot of my answers and a lot of my you know, knowledge on those specific questions. And I feel like maybe it could go a little bit more in depth to a degree that people want me to go. So anyway, I think at this point I'm rambling. So again, casual. But this has been it for a basic guide to garden design, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope it wasn't too long, and I hope that those of you who are aspiring gardeners and horticulturists out there can, you know, come out of this maybe having a little bit more confidence that, you know, you don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the world to have a great garden and to be as creative as you want to be when it comes to natural types of things. So anyway, again, I'm Arlie. This has been a vlog, and I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.